One of the things that I would be having some conversation with new people who find their way here would be around what brought you here? How did you hear about us? The best way to connect with new people is by personal invitation. Now you know that well over 90% of the people who visit your congregation visit your website first. And if your website isn't normal in terms of the expectations of the day, you'll never see those people. You know, the over 90% of people who, they look at your website first, if something doesn't click with them, they're not going to physically show up here. So it's one of the most important tools that a congregation has is their website. Another question was, what do you feel is the greatest challenge facing Wellspring as you look to the future? One person says, getting the people who are members now to invest in the opportunities that are available in the church. There are so many people who just come to worship and leave. And then about the capital campaign, they say, I don't know that people care that much about this facility. Another person says that the challenge is the opportunity here. There's more and more competition for people's time, and the ability to commit with others is not always tied to an organization like the church. That's true. People are busier, our lives are more fragmented. But what I can tell you is that there are churches that are thriving in our culture. I know of a church in Louisville, Kentucky. One of my daughters is a member there. People literally submit an application with references, which they check, to be a member there. This church is thriving. Young people are literally submitting an application, signing a membership covenant to be there. It is an amazingly dynamic place. The Sunday that I was there was last year, the Sunday immediately prior to Labor Day. One of the lower Sundays of the year, especially when the weather was as beautiful as it was that weekend. And in a service, the third of 4 services that day at the location where I was, there were about 650 people in that third service of the morning. I'm 54 this year. If 10% of the people were in their 50s or older, I'd be profoundly amazed. There were young people everywhere. You couldn't stir them with a stick. There was a young couple right behind us with a wee little baby, just a brand new one. And that was a wonderful thing to see. But there were young people all over that place. And what I hear a lot in the main line is young people just aren't interested in religion anymore, or young people just aren't as committed. Those two statements, young people aren't interested, young people aren't committed, those are patently false. What people are hungry for is for relationship with God and a community of faith that's meaningful to them, that makes a difference in their life. That's what they're hungry for. So it's not just about competition for people's time. Someone else suggests that the challenge is, I'm not sure how willing the congregation is to think outside the box. We've got to recognize that revitalization is an important issue. Someone says, I think the challenge is money, continuing to pay for this place. And then they add, I worry about burnout for Chris and Amber. Again, it's not about the money. It never is. I've worked with over 160 congregations, not all of them on financially related projects, but I hear often as a presenting problem, we have a financial problem or a financial crisis. I've only had 2 out of 160 congregations where I agreed with that assessment, and in both of those cases they were so far in debt that our professional recommendation was that they close. Now that went over like a lead balloon in both cases, but in one case we projected 10 back-to-back 3-year capital campaigns, and the church would still be dangerously in debt. So one of the great things about Wellspring, you have no debt. You're in a great position there. Okay, I asked the question, Question number 6. Today, in my opinion, Wellspring is stable and steady. 64% of the respondents said that Wellspring was stable and steady. Stable and steady is a good thing. Our world's in chaos. Institutions and families are coming apart at the seams. To have some stability is a good thing. I do want to say that as far as a congregation's growth and development is concerned, you're either growing or you're declining. I really don't believe in a plateau. So stability, that's a good thing. It was interesting. One person said that the congregation was dynamic and growing. That's awesome perspective. The thing that concerns me here is that a third of your people thought that it was declining and dying. Now, people wanted to parse those words. You know, they'll say it's dynamic and stable, or, you know, declining and stable, or, you know, they want to parse that in a variety of different ways. But it is of some concern to me that a third of the folks feel like it's in the declining mode. I believe that Wellspring is at a crossroads. You're at an intersection. One road is the road of opportunity. The other road is the road of indecision. Where are you headed as a congregation over the next 3 to 15 years or so? Reflecting the indecision, consider what I just mentioned, 64% stable and steady, and a third is declining and dying. Carefully and prayerfully consider the comments that were shared in this review. We shared verbatim comments that we heard both verbally in the interviews as well as on the surveys, with no names attached, obviously. One part of your current reality is that less than half of your 222 members are reflected in your average worship attendance. That is a crucial concern to me. Another part of reality is that the costs of maintaining a congregation like this are considerably higher than they were just a few decades ago. Insurance is up, I mean, utilities are up, everything across the board. Those things reflect the indecision. From the perspective of opportunity, it's clear, to me at least, that a close, caring Christian community is here. How many of you drive less than 15 minutes to get here this morning? Okay, how many of you more than 15? Okay, so it's about 80-20 or so. What I'd encourage you leaders to do is to factor what the reasonable drive time is, the normal or average drive time. That space in minutes becomes your quote-unquote reach area. Those are the people who are most likely to be prospective folks who could be a part of Wellspring. But I know that that reach area is filled, unless Madison's just super weird, and I know it is, has a little weirdness to it. Well, I've been to Austin, Texas. You know, they claim themselves on being weird down there. But the idea is that people are really spiritually hungry, but institutionally alienated. So how are you going to connect with that and help people find their way here? How is your local congregation's mission and ministry touching these people? What would it look like if Wellspring were dynamic and growing to the point where guests would tell the people that they know, hey, I found something you need to check out. This place called Wellspring United Methodist Church. Now, it's a church, and it's United Methodist Church, but bear with me, you need to check it out. It's awesome. That's when you know you're onto something, is when your guests are talking to other people about their experience here. Okay, communication. Question number 7 was, how familiar are you with Wellspring's renovation plans? And the 3 choices here: very familiar, you had 20% of your people; somewhat familiar, 56%. That's good news. 86% of your people, 76% of your people are somewhat familiar or very familiar. I'm not a math major. Yeah, I just got back from the Boundary Waters late last night, so I've got nature on my brain and I'm tired too. So, the thing that concerns me here is nearly a quarter of your people would suggest out of the three choices, first I've heard about it. That's a huge concern to me. It's going to be helpful for you to communicate clearly to everyone concerned, regardless of what category they might be in on this question. Help them understand how these projects support the mission and ministry of this church. Yes, it's about your building. It's not about helping starving people, but your facility is a beachhead for ministry. It's a mission outpost. It's a mission center, ministry center, a place from which you go out to serve and love people. Here's a point that someone made. Somewhere between somewhat familiar and first I've heard about it. See, everybody wants to parse the answers. They go on to say, I've heard brief little things about it. The word needs to get out better. Communication is huge. Something this big should be talked about and talked about. I'm shocked that we're not hearing more about it. I don't think the congregation understands the full scope of what we're doing. And then someone else said, there is a perception among leadership that we are open, but our practices tend to be more elitist, talking among themselves. We're sometimes surprised about things the council thought were more public. It's a common communication problem. It's not necessarily about the volume of communication, it's about the clarity of communication. And in today's world, communicating in a way that suits the person that we're trying to engage with. I would suggest, if you don't have some kind of a communications team, that you develop a small ad hoc kind of a team that can work alongside council and your staff to communicate. One of the things that I would do is ask every member, how do you, and how do you, and how do you most desire to be communicated with? And what you'll find is, for some people, in my mom's generation, for example, if you're going to reach them, you need to send them a letter. And now my mom will read it. A lot of people don't read, it's from the church. I won't dig into that anymore. But then younger people, it needs to be email or text. If you're not able to communicate with your people by text, you're several years behind the curve. So how you communicate is vitally important. We asked the question, do you believe the proposed renovation plans will enhance Wellspring's ministry and mission? A little over a quarter of the people said absolutely. Yes, I believe it will enhance the mission. Almost as many, 21%, said no, I don't see that at all. The good news here is that 53% of your people are unsure. The opportunity point, again, is for leadership to communicate clearly how do these particular projects enhance Wellspring's ability to more effectively live out God's calling on you as a congregation. Question 9, and this is the most important question on the survey for those of you who took it. How supportive are you of the decision to explore a capital campaign in order to raise money to fund these plans? 90% of those responding are either supportive or very supportive. And for a campaign to succeed, in our experience, you need at least 65% of people to be supportive or very supportive. And here you've got 90%. That's good news. For those who are unsupportive, it seems to me from the responses across the survey that people don't understand or perhaps don't own how these things are going to help the church move forward in mission and ministry. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to take place. We asked the question, what important factors might hinder the success of a proposed campaign? People were pretty forthcoming with several things. I don't know where the money's going to come from. cost of the project, poor communication, a number of different pieces. I'll let you dig into that later. Then we ask the question number 11, do you feel that the right leadership is in place for a successful campaign and renovation project? Now, the question is not a referendum on confidence in leadership. I want you to hear that. The question is, it's not how do you feel about our leadership overall. The question is, do you feel the right leadership is in place for a successful campaign and renovation project? The good news for both your pastor, your clergy, the lay leadership is that people were affirming, at 57% of the people were affirming, and 36% in the case of the pastor and 40% in the case of lay leadership say, I just don't know. And what they're saying, you can see from the comments later, is that, well, I'm just not sure, how Chris might do with this, with the capital campaign process. It's not a lack of affirmation of leadership, clergy or lay. It's just I'm not sure, people are unsure how they're going, whether they're ready for a capital campaign or not.